great.
Well,
Uh,
we are right on time, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into this hot topic of ours. So today's webinar, we're going to be jumping into fire protection, the fifth control layer, and talking about perhaps maybe it is, and perhaps maybe it's not, but we're certainly going to go through many different areas around a building, both single family and multifamily. We're going to talk a little bit about some bigger buildings, which will certainly be exciting as we start to transition to some more of that stuff. Um, my name is Nick Stone. I am the residential architectural specialist for the U.S. I am here with Lewis. Lewis, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yep, Lewis Smith here. I'm the Rockwell Business Development Manager. I serve the U.S. Northeast, and today I am the fill-in for, of course, the ever handsome Chris Caparucio. You're going to see his face and hear my voice there. So, he's on the first slide. But yeah, I'm going to be here to help, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Nick.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on, bud. And we're here with Randy Williams. If Randy, you want to tell us a little bit about you and what we're
Yeah,
up to lately.
sure. I am now officially the editor of Green Building Advisor. Been working in that capacity since about June. A recovering general contractor. Haven't done that for a little bit now. I also do building investigations, energy audits, blower door testing, code compliant blower door testing, stuff like that. And I'm in northern Minnesota, climate zone 7.
Beautiful, balmy Minnesota.
Yeah.
nice.
And then maybe a slightly warmer. Will
Yeah.
King, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
A little warmer, a little more humid, probably. But yeah, so Will King, and I am the owner of High Cotton Homes here in Florence, Alabama. So to your point, a little further south, we're climate zone 3, if that matters to anybody. It's just dang hot here. That's just what you need to know. I was before I was a builder, I was a 10-year professional firefighter for the city of Decatur. I had the privilege of teaching firefighters across the world. Actually, I was an instructor with the Alabama Fire College. We did a lot of DoD contracts, so I got to travel some. That was a good time. A lot of what I taught was firefighter self-rescue, like our smoke diver course. But all that is related to how fast things burn, and the amount of time we have to get people out without getting ourselves burned up. So I did that. Never thought I would leave that, by the way, and then jumped into the being a builder. I don't know what I was thinking. I laugh because Randy said he's recovered, and I'm over here getting hammered. So I get it. Yeah, but that's what I do. We're just a smaller design build firm here in Florence, so all custom work, and we have a lot of fun. So
Beautiful. Well, I'm glad you brought up the fact that you're a firefighter, and certainly also you brought up the fact that looking at how different things burn and how that all plays a role into how that fire in a home actually performs.
yep.
Today we're going to be going through a lot of different areas of the building, not just only what are the details, but what are some of the other things that are causing some of these fires. Will, I don't know if you know this or not, but oops. Uh, they call me Firefighter Stone,
Oh
with
man, that's hilarious.
That
constantly
is
putting out fires.
AI. That's not real.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Are those your grandpa suspenders on those cutout pants? Like,
listen, you can't, a dog on suspenders.
those
I
look
think
like
they're
they would
making a
melt if they
comeback.
got a little hot. I don't know if those
Yeah.
are gonna.
Nick was the February edition on the calendar when that came
Yeah.
Yeah,
out.
and maybe I should go back. I was never in a calendar.
Oh, okay.
Although I
Well,
got
it's never too
multiple
late, Will.
requests, but I just no, I'm kidding. Oh man,
But
that's good stuff.
yeah, no, I mean, all jokes aside, when it comes to fire hardening, that's something that certainly, us here at Rockwell, we really, strive for, trying to figure out as many of these details as we can, to provide assemblies and systems, for building, building better homes that are more resilient to fire, whether it's something that happens inside your home, your neighbors. Um, but when we think about fire, it isn't only just about the house, is it, Will?
No. No, no,
Here,
no. We're talking
here.
about all pieces of it, right? I mean, we're talking the contents that we're throwing into our house now with no idea of the impact that that causes. Both furnishings and then landscaping. We talk about, all the. Luckily, we don't have many wildfires here in Alabama, but I mean, it's amazing. I've seen something as simple as a cigarette in a
Yeah.
flower bed burn a house to the ground. So it's every piece of it.
Absolutely. As we start to really, as I was putting this PowerPoint together and really kind of digesting what does a fire mean and what does fire protection really mean, and what I started off with thinking was just here's my home. It quickly became quite a bit of my acreage around my home and paying attention to that. So as I start to kind of think about home hardening, I certainly again think about non-combustible materials both on the inside and the outside of the home.
Mhm.
I think heavily on ventilation.
Yeah.
Randy, when you think ventilations and you think ambers, what are some things that come to mind for you for fire protection?
Uh, keep embers out of the ventilation areas. It's that simple. And if you do have something in it, make it not non-combustible. Make sure you have something in that cavity that can't burn, and then you're protecting yourself two ways.
Absolutely. Coming from Vermont, and as they started, venturing more on the West Coast, it quickly becomes a lot about just keep those ambers out. Now, Will, is it a
Mhm.
fair assumption to say that it's not always necessarily the flames that when it comes to a wildfire or a fire next to your house, for instance, but it's these ambers as they kind of linger in
Yeah.
the air, causing some problems.
Yeah, and I guess to echo Randy, so non-combustibles is just a good general conversation about the exterior of your house. So, I mean, not I guess not wildfire specific about the embers, but I think about chimney fires, right? I've seen a lot of houses catch on fire because the chimney, right? They hadn't taken care of their fireplace. It's a wood burner. They've had some terrible trash firewood, and then the next thing you know, they got a flame shooting out of the top of their chimney, and there's embers associated with that. And the next thing you know, those are floating down onto the roof. Well, it just so happened that builder put vinyl siding on the chimney, so that's not good.
Mhm.
You get a little bit into a gable vent or a soffit, and it's also vinyl. And then here in the South, most of them are just perforated vinyl. So there's multiple issues with that. But yeah, I mean, it's metal roofs, right? Not shingles. That helps. Hardy board versus vinyl. That helps. Stone, masonry. All of those exterior, I guess, finishes make a big difference. But even probably the worst I've ever seen, Nick, is vinyl siding over foam board. Like
Ooh.
Oh,
I actually saw this happen. So it was that whole cigarette analogy. So it was like cigarettes and some pine straw.
Mm.
Um, Grandma just threw it out the window or out the side of the porch when she came in. That's what we do here in Alabama and road tide. But she threw that out there and it flames up. It hits that vinyl siding and then it starts to melt and drip. Well, now we have more fuel. And the next thing you know, I mean, the sheathing behind it is just like gasoline as well once it gets burning. And then it runs the roof, right? So then it gets in the attic and it's just
Absolutely.
blowing, and we burnt like the whole roof of the house burned off before anybody inside even knew about it. It's
Right.
mm,
crazy. But that also translates to wildfires, right? So if you got, blowing embers coming across the valley and hitting these houses, all of that is a lot. I mean, and that's common, right? The cigarette's not super common, but the ember from a wildfire is common. So when you think about, all your exterior finishes and even, insulation to that point. So if it not would have been foam board, had it been comfort board, they wouldn't have had a problem. The vinyl would have melted off, but
Right.
so that's it's every part of it, man. I mean, I don't want any vinyl anywhere just because I've seen it melt too quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
well, and I don't know if you guys know this, but in New Hampshire lately, there's been a drought and they've banned smoking in the state of New Hampshire, in public areas. You
Wow.
cannot smoke, you can't light a cigar, you can't light a cigarette. So, it's real, right? It's happening. So, what were you gonna say, Randy?
Um, To Will's comment too, it's not just cigarettes. I've seen charcoal grills or gas grills up against the house
Hmm.
where that's also melted the siding of the house. It's
Yep.
just, don't put that there. Put that away from the house.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, when we think about fire hardening, I like to think about this, assemblies as equations. It's important that we have a, piece of that equation that has some kind of non-combustible or fire resilient insulation for that fire protection. Now, one of the big terms that we kind of kick around right now, and especially with the fires that recently happened out in California, is this idea of WUI. This is going to be the wildlife urban interface. Randy, do you want to walk us through what that means?
Yeah, it's just the transition from wildland or forested areas to the inner city. And as you move closer to that, you got uh, obviously you're going to have less and less vegetation, wild, overgrowth, stuff like that as you get closer to the city. But that interface where you're not quite to the city yet, there's a lot of stuff there that can burn, and that those embers, which I've heard up to 2 miles, they can
Yeah.
stay aloft and end up,
Yeah.
it can be a lot. The fire can be ways away and still cause a lot of problems. So
That's pretty remarkable. 2 miles, up to 2 miles, and you could still be, I mean, that could be a whole town away, and you're like, oh, that's.
Yeah.
But in this picture on the screen here, you guys can actually see where it starts on the left hand side. You can see that wildlife, and then as you transition into more of that urban setting, as Randy suggested, you kind of lose more and more of those, trees or that kind of wildlife setting. But you still have just enough of that where if you're, like you said, maybe a mile or two away, you're still getting that effect of that wildlife part of it into that urban setting, which is still potential for causing some issues, especially in dry seasons, like Lewis was talking about, and it certainly caused some serious problems. Now, when I think of, wildfires, and I think of, every single year on the news, kind of what's happening, I kind of generally go to California. Will, is that a fair assessment? Do you kind of think of California when you think of,
Yeah.
wildfires in this case? Is that something you think about?
I do. Yeah. I was actually about to say something a second ago to you, but it's fascinating to me because the whole, what'd you say, 2 miles, Randy, on embers floating through there? I mean, I think we here in the South anyway underestimate the wind that's hitting the coast out there, right? That it's you don't really have a good concept of the amount of wind coming in and then the amount of fuel in those areas. I mean, it's like blowtorches, man, like bombs going off when like the whole hillside is just, brush and it's all dry and crusty and nobody's done controlled burns or tried to keep that maintained. And then, it lights off and the wind gets behind it. I mean, it is unbelievably hot at that point.
It,
And
is that something that's pretty safe? I always saw controlled burns in a little bit in my area, but never really thought about it. Is that something you guys would see a lot in the firefighter side of things?
we didn't really see much of it ourselves. The forestry guys here, the wildlife biologist folks, they're involved in that. A lot of the state parks and things, they'll do control burns. Some even in our area, like um, landowners will do it to their pine forest basically. And it's not really the wildfire part as much as it is just forest management in general, just to
Gotcha.
to help thin out the brush and competition so that the trees can be more healthy and established. But
Sure.
yeah, I mean, done properly in the right time of the year, it's very safe. And I mean, I think there were some reports I remember reading about after the horrible fires in California that happened. Was that 2 years ago now? About how some of that had been falling to the wayside. Maybe about like not they weren't really
Right.
keeping up with that like they should have. Maybe
Hmm.
that's a bigger task than it's easier said than done, right? I mean, you're
Sure.
talking crazy terrain, and that's also like I think I forget about that in California too. Just how vicious that terrain was where those fires were. I mean, it's bad to fight. It's hard to get people in there.
Sure.
It you gotta be half Billy Goat to get up and down those hills,
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, that's that I don't know, but yeah, I always think about California when I
So But I mean, is that the only place? I mean, if we're thinking about, when we think about the whole country, is that the only place that we're really seeing that need for fire protection from that outside? Or is it really more than just that?
Yeah, I would
It's
assume
Yeah.
it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So this
yeah.
is kind of a nice
Mhm.
little map of the U.S., kind of showing where some of those kind of urban areas, or sorry, those wildlife areas are going to be. You can see we're in green. This is all going to be territory where you're going to have a lot of a lot of trees, a lot of stuff like that going on. Then you can kind of see some of the WUI index, which is going to be in red and yellow. And that's just not just only over here in California. There are actually many other areas. So California, Oregon, you have Washington, Colorado. The big one, we're down in Texas right now. So for us, the big one is the Austin, Dallas, Houston corridor, that little triangle area down there in Texas. There's actually quite a large need for to having some kind of fire resiliency built into that equation, even down in some of those areas.
Mhm.
Certainly, as I started to kind of look at all this stuff and piece it together, again, California sticks in my mind, but these are some other big areas that are having some issues. In that firefighter or not firefighter, in that WUI area where we should be thinking about adding non-combustibles into those assemblies. So
Right.
now.
So we're
Mhm.
we're looking at on that, those red areas and the yellow areas are where we have high population density interfacing with forest land effectively. All right. It's not just where's the forest land, because we have a lot of green areas where the mountain ranges are and things. And there's almost no houses, right? Back to the Billy Coat thought.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I'm looking at, I mean, even in Texas, not far from where we are, there's areas of high population density that have potential risk. And now asking towards Will here, in your experience, the higher the population density, the closer the buildings are. Once the flames get into those areas, we talk about the embers burning and floating 2 miles. How easy is it when the houses are so close together for the embers to ignite house after house after house, right? I mean, is that a risk too?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the once you have one or two units light off, the exposure there becomes a real problem, and that's not even just wildfire related. I mean, house fires happen every day, right? And so, a lot of municipalities have gotten involved with their setback requirements or their code requirements in terms of just fire resistive assemblies like what we're talking about, like even flame blocks on soffits and things. But yeah, it's one of the big things that we focused on, we got on scene of a house fire was once there was life safety handled for the current house was immediately, we would also focus on exposures. It's not uncommon for us to have hand lines on adjoining houses just to keep them cool from igniting from radiant heat and having damage there. There's no point in two houses burning if one's going to burn, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, once
Yeah.
once you know, this conversation is very much related to um, tight setback housing and then those materials on them. So I mean, that's a good point.
So, kind of, you just brought up some of your experience. I wanted to share with everyone an experience that we had. We were actually out in California, and the fire department had two identical buildings that they used, one with non-combustible materials and one with combustible materials. So that way we can have, a chance to get out there and see what it is that we're really fighting, what happens when wind gets involved, and all those things. So on the left-hand side, you can see where on the bottom. So when we start talking about ground zero, we're talking really about that first 5 feet all around your building. So you can see where the mulch and the shrubbery, that fire actually started right in that mulch and started to really develop around the building.
Mhm.
Then on the right hand side, you can start to see where that wind started picking up. It started to really drive and feed that fire. You can start to see where in in the gutter system where it was just completely just starting to drip. Some of the other pictures you can actually see it physically dripping from the intensity of the heat. You know, as that fire was fueled by all that wind, and then as you transition to now really looking at, all right, what are the siding materials? What are the roofing materials? What's the trim, the window? You can actually see in the middle where now we have a full fire that's really kind of taking over that building. Um, and Will, you know, being that you've seen this in, you know, in person, this is a very intense fire. This is not something we were probably 50 feet away, and it was very intense. So
Hmm.
there's not a whole lot once it gets to this point that you can really do to help reduce some of this fire load. What is kind of your experience
Yeah.
on a situation like that?
Well, you definitely couldn't. I mean, you're not gonna really reduce the damage too much at that point. You know, that was like a full, was that an enclosed structure, or was that open
Yeah,
on one side? It was enclosed.
yeah. Well, what
Yeah.
happened was once the window popped, it just
Yeah,
really.
it got inside. Yeah, so it
Yeah.
looks like that's to the point of what I would call flashover.
Yep.
And so that's like the temperature of everything inside the structure off gassing, and all those gases will then ignite. So then you're just completely flamed over at that point.
And
Yeah, and it's, various factors can lead to different timelines for flashover. Um, but that's what we're trying to limit, right? Because that's when that's you can't survive that fire, you
no.
know. So
And
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to slow down in what we're doing.
and we
It
took
almost seems like this fire starts, around the corner on the left is grandma's porch, right? What Will was talking about, grandma and her cigarette. She flicks it into you know, the mulch. It sneaks around, lights
Hmm.
the fence on fire, and it's the fence that catches the house,
Yeah.
right? So it's more than it's about every little aspect of how you've designed the area around your home that counts.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, I'll echo what I said earlier too. Like, soffits are so important, man. Like, I've seen so many houses burn to the ground because, once the fire gets into that attic space, it's wide open at that point. Lots of dry fuel available, and air at that point. But it makes its way into this one. Obviously I wasn't here, but it certainly appears that it went through the soffit. And
it.
that was like
Yeah.
a vinyl gutter that's dripping, and I'm assuming the soffit's also probably vinyl. And I bet it just went straight through it.
So, it's you would, intuitively you would think, oh, it's going to do those things, but when you see it in person, it really just completely like, oh
Mind
wow,
blowing.
that is
Hmm.
incredible what that force is really doing. And like you said, it was really all about those details. So let's
Hmm.
go ahead and we'll start to jump into those details. And now that we've kind of talked a little bit about, what to look out for, what to not, now we'll break into the house, into the details, and start to kind of walk our way through this. Randy, if we're starting to talk, starting at the bottom of the wall, and we're thinking of again, how do we keep that fire out? How do we keep those ambers out from getting into those assembly? Does it all start at the bottom of the wall?
Oh, yeah, keep that, well, we already mentioned this, but keep that 5 foot defensible space around the house clear from first off. There's also a suggestion or regulation that you got to keep 6 inches of clearance from the ground level to the bottom of the structure. That's not only a fire thing, but it's also a building code. You got to leave that separation to keep things from getting damaged. But that also helps that fire, right? If you do get something that's burning right up against the house, you've got that clearance where hopefully it's not catching the bottom of the wall on fire. Um, a lot of the houses that the new construction that we're seeing now, vented rain screen assemblies. Again, keep the stuff from moving into that wall assembly. And if it is moving into it, make it so it can't burn. Make it, the a mineral rock wool product on the as a continuous insulation, and then a fire resistant cladding, metal or fiber cement, stucco, something like that, to make sure that we don't have a big fuel source that starts burning the side of the house off.
All right, so we want to stop those embers from getting in. Will, how do we stop it? What is it that we're looking at the base of that wall before those ambers enter into? What are some of the materials that we're looking at using there?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I'm sitting here like of all the things that we've done in the last few years, making sure that I hadn't screwed up. I think that, depending on what that range screen product is, if you're using strips, whether it's wood fir strips or a rolled range screen product, I mean, a lot of that stuff's going to be flammable, right? I mean, don't you guys agree with that? I mean,
Hmm.
the ones that come to my mind, they're all either going to melt or burn. I think that, to keep the embers out, we're also keeping bugs out. We're also trying to keep, you know, whatever, wasp, yellow jackets,
Yep,
honeybees, all
absolutely.
the things from getting in those cavities that we're now all trying to create for rain screens. That like a metal screen there at the bottom is going to obviously help a lot with that.
Mhm.
Keeping bugs from getting in there. But I'm also like, if you I can't draw on this screen, but let's pretend like there's a cavity here between the comfort board and that cladding. You may get fire in there, but if there's not any fuel source really or air available, the siding can't burn, the comfort board can't burn. You may lose. It doesn't mean you're not going to have some damage, but you're not going to lose your house, right? You
Right.
you may have to redo a section of rain screen and reclad a wall section, but um, at that point on this assembly, I wouldn't be concerned about it just immediately blowing into the house cavity or the cavity of the wall or
Right.
I don't know what you have on your soffit right here in this detail, but
Now, Lewis, we ran into some cool products today as we were at the Build Show Live. You remember those 1/8 inch ventilation or less metal mesh materials that were used down at the bottom of those walls?
Yeah, I can't remember the product name specifically, but right, it's about the size of the gap in that screen. So if the gap is too big, if the weave is too wide, then again we allow those embers up in. Do you have a product in mind there, Nick?
So yeah, we've been working with a bunch of companies, Vulcan Vent being one of them that we work with quite often. What's unique about their product? They actually have an intumescent painting on their ventilation channel. In a second here, when we go to the one of the next slides, we'll see kind of a more of a close-up profile picture of it. But a lot of these, these ventilation products are starting to add some intumescent paints or material to the system, so that way, when any naturally you're gonna get that airflow like you want. But when something happens where you get an amber, whether it's from your neighbor's house catching on fire, you're in a WUI area, and that amber is trying to suck up in there, that's gonna that heat is gonna trigger the intumescent paint to swell up and choke out that amber, not allowing it to enter into the building and kind of snuffing it out. Now, if you're in an area where, hey, maybe I'm not as concerned about WUI, I'm not in a WUI style area, but adding an 1/8 inch metal screen, whether it be aluminum, whether it be steel, something like that on the bottom of the wall, that would also help out anything that could possibly get up in there. But like Will said, you're still going to have insects, so you'll be able to take care of that. You'll have great ventilation. So depending upon your area, there's some different options to the level of which you want that fire protection to kind of represent. And then, if anything gets through that system, then adding a non-combustible material like Comfort Board 80 on that outside, protecting the sheathing, that becomes a secondary, very important step, right, Will?
mhm. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You're with that exterior insulation added to it. I mean, yeah, you're definitely having protection from whether it's zip or whatever commodity OSB or house wrap or whatever you're using. Um, that's going to burn, right? And you get
Right.
enough heat on that, you're going to have an issue there. So that's a certainly an added benefit to going into having the exterior insulation. I mean, fire's got to have fuel, oxygen, and heat, right? And so if we can
Right.
cut out the fuel, things get better. I mean, it's pretty simple. You got to take one of the three pieces away from it for it to not
Yep,
happen. So,
Hmm.
absolutely.
What if we don't have that continuous exterior installation? There's a lot of places around the country that aren't requiring that yet.
Right.
What should we do for a sheathing material to maybe reduce that risk? OSB, plywood obviously are pretty combustible products. What other options do we have out there that maybe we want to think about? I mean, I know one of them, an MGO board, which
Yeah.
is they're pricey, but and a little bit tougher to source. One of the few places we can get that product is out of China. Unfortunately, they got to come over on a boat, but that is a non-combustible product.
Hmm.
Fire treated plywood is another one that we've used on some fire stations and things
Yeah,
like that in Vermont. Again, it's still kind of a plywood, but it's treated with material to make it fire resistant. And guys seem to like to install that because it keeps like materials. That
Yeah.
was always a big thing for them.
I think it's one of those, Randy, you got to pick your poison, right? I
yeah,
mean, something's going to kill us all at some point in time. But, you could name a bunch of them, like glass rock sheathing, that
yeah,
would work.
yeah,
We could build a concrete wall, that would work,
yeah,
but if, it becomes a budget, right? I mean, it becomes what's normal practice, what you have labor for, what you can afford. I mean, I think if, pick what's going to help you the most, right? Is it the exterior insulation or is it cladding? My vote's the cladding,
yeah,
right? If you're trying to prevent, that's going to be your first line in that assembly right there from keeping fire to get into your house from the outside is that cladding. Whatever you have on the outside of it, that's first and foremost.
yeah.
I
That's
started
sorry.
to do a lot more with stucco as I started to work more and more on the West Coast. And honestly, I'm kind of starting to fall in love with a little bit with that stucco. Now we can take that non-combustible material, and then I'm hoping you're adding a comfort board 80 behind that, and now you have two products that are completely
Hmm.
touching one another. That are both of them are non-combustible materials, providing a really great solution for that. So even sometimes getting rid of that ventilation channel and that wood siding, something like that, and going to a stucco style facade, sometimes that will really kind of check the boxes that you're looking for too. Like you're saying, from a cost perspective, we're always trying to balance that. So certainly another option. Before we kind of get off this picture here, I just wanted to point out on that bottom diagram there on the right hand side. It's also important that we don't just stop right where that sheathing is, kind of carrying that non-combustible down just a hair more. So that way we don't kind of have ambers or fire trying to come up at an angle and hit the bottom of that plywood and somehow skip it. We want to bring that into that insulation down or bring that siding down, whether it's stucco or something, some kind of cement board siding or something like that. Bring that down just a little bit more to make sure that we don't have any fire hitting that bottom plate or that plywood there at that location. Just giving us a little bit more added protection there.
Yeah. Also insulating your slab too, which is helpful.
Oh yes, definitely was insulate slab.
Yeah.
Then as we
There it is.
Yeah. Then as we transition, we start to move up the wall. Again, these pesky soffits. Will, you were talking a few minutes ago about, hey man, we got to make sure that these are dialed in to make sure we have protection. Actually, a lot of projects I'm starting to work on are just completely going no ventilation in the soffit and doing either a ventilation over roof like you see on the right hand side,
Hmm.
where they're actually doing 2 layers of plywood on there and they're putting a ventilation channel in between 2 layers. They're using again a product like a Vulcan vent, which just to kind of take a pause here, just so we can kind of explain what that is. The Vulcan vent, and again, there's other ones out there as well. But basically, you have this kind of in the middle, this black part. It's basically a honeycomb channel that has intumescent applied to it. You get these legs that kick off on either side that will change depending upon where you are, what you're trying to use it for. Like if you're trying to use it for the bottom of the wall, you can get rid of one of these legs. That way it doesn't kind of stick out or try to stick into the building, depending upon how you're using it. And that's one of the big reasons why I think this is a cool product because it gives you a lot of versatility and all of them have great fire protection kind of in mind. Um, so for
Now,
yeah.
Randy, we just saw each other at the Building Science Symposium in Philly,
Hmm.
and we got to see Dr. Joe Seberg speak um, pretty plainly about his thoughts on a vented roof system, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted your opinion here. We're looking at these two systems on the screen. One is vented, one is unvented. What are you seeing? What are your thoughts on the vented versus unvented? Whether it's fire hardening or just better building science in general.
It, my climate zone 7, almost every assembly is vented. It's
Yep.
rare we see an unvented or even an over roof type installation for that assembly. Um, Dr. Joe, he's saying do not vent. And if you're in fire country, absolutely do not vent. Uh, his one exception is if you're in snow country. If you have an area where you're going to get 60 inches, or I think that's what he said, 5 feet of snow or something, or over the
Yeah.
course of the winter, you need to ventilate the upper part of the assembly of the roof. Overvent, or I mean, make it an overvent assembly. Make sure you got the continuous insulation, and then it's just a small channel uh, right underneath whatever the roofing material or that last layer of plywood, which would be a fire rated, I would imagine, in that application. Keep the vent as small as you can. For him, it's going to be 1.5 inches to 2 inches is what he's going to want to see there. And then you're going to have to use a product like this. He was talking about a manually closed product.
Mm.
I have a problem with that. I mean, it was Joe's, that's what he wants, but if you're not home or this fire happens to start and you're just not aware it's going on, who's going to think to go outside and close that vent channel in their soffit or at the bottom of their wall assembly? I like to have the automatic products like this Vulcan vent to make sure that it's closing off automatically. Nobody has to think of hey, that's one of the processes during a fire is to make sure I close this thing. So
That's a good
Yeah.
point. If football is on, I'm not paying attention to what's going on inside. I'm rooting for my Bucks to go win some more, and next thing you know, the
There's
house is
enough,
on fire.
there's enough rock wool around Nick's house. There could be a wildfire outside. Get the football game on, and he's never going to evacuate. You know? What
Um,
about you, Will? Vented or unvented roof systems?
We're unvented all the way.
Yep.
Yeah, we do totally encapsulated attics and conditioned attics on every project, So we've had great luck with it for many reasons, but I mean, I guess this is an added reason that we don't even have to worry about it anymore because we're using like a, solid fiber cement board soffit typically. In fascia, and then whether it's metal or shingle roofs, Randy, roofs. Uh, my roof. Looks like you're like a dog barking. Yeah, we're unvented. So that's me and Jake Bruton have argued about this multiple times in the past, but we have huge attics that people take advantage of for storage and various things, mechanical space even. So, I'm a big fan of getting, of course, vented attics, vented roofs, two different conversations, but that's how we do it. We're not venting our roof assemblies either. So,
Yep.
I just think the big thing, whether you're doing vented or unvented, is just make sure you connect those control layers. Make sure that fire hardening is going from the wall to the roof. If you're venting, make sure you're using the appropriate venting material. Don't allow those ambers to get in there. You use materials that are going to kind of, help fight or battle that, whether it's an intumescent or whether it's just using, 1/8 inch screen to help meet that, minimum standard. And also pay attention to what zone you're in. So if you're doing an unvented in zone 1 to 3, it's going to look different than an unvented in zone 4 to 8. So there's some serious variables in there, but at the end of the day, continuity is super, super important. And whether you have soffits and no soffits, making sure you have a plan for fire is going to be key. Moving to the ridge, it's going to be very similar to those soffits. If you're having a ventilated system, you want to make sure you're using the correct product so that way you're not allowing ambers to enter the building. Again, this is another kind of picture of the Vulcan vent where you can see them on the upper left on how those are being used. We use a little bit of a different approach for our details, having that ventilation come up, kind of wrapping around and out. Again, both details are pretty effective, but you can see the detail a lot better in this system here. So now we've talked exterior. This is something obviously we all believe in heavily. What about interior? Is that going to cause a problem? Absolutely. A lot of the US, when we look at it, it doesn't have exterior insulation. This is something that, we're really pushing for heavily. We think it's the next generation of how we're going to build and insulate fire protection. However, this is still, a big part of what we're facing is just framed out walls with the siding up against them. So what are some of the hiccups that we're going to kind of face, Will, as we start to think about maybe existing homes that we can run into that are older, maybe they're balloon frame, what would
Mm.
be kind of popping out for you, thinking about that perspective?
Yeah, that's a big can of worms. The balloon framing's always the conversation, right? That's in every firefighter one textbook that's ever been written is
Actually, Will,
balloon.
before,
Yep.
just in case somebody doesn't know what that means, what is balloon frame?
Yeah, but I mean the easiest way to say it is that your studs go all the way up, right? And then you have this ledger that gets cut into the side of your stud. It's a good picture on the screen there, actually. Whereas instead of having like your top plates and then the bottom plate, into and then the next bottom plate on top of the floor assembly is just tying into the side of your framing. So you end up with a void going all the way up. Um, and used to houses didn't have insulation at all, right? I mean, like that's where you see balloon framing more common down here. I remember several of the houses in Decatur that we'd go to that built in like the early 1900s. It's not uncommon for them to have zero insulation in them, just plaster walls and balloon framed. The problem is it's a great channel for fire to run, right? And
Chimney,
and
good chimney.
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. And it, then nothing's air sealed in these houses, and so then it's basically just drawing through the attic. So that's always a big one. If you're going to remodel a house like this, it's hard to just change balloon framing, but I would certainly pack it full of a comfort bat insulation or something that's not going to burn, to give you that fire block from running all the way up your balloon frame. And so that's always the biggest one that stands out to me when you talk about older construction. We don't see that in anything new here. I mean, have you guys run across that anywhere?
Yeah, Tim Mueller in the Pacific Northwest is doing a lot of balloon framing, new
Interesting.
construction. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course that's new construction. He's got fire blocking. It's
Everywhere. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We see them in a
Yeah.
lot of tall walls. For us, we have a lot of big kitchens that, when you look at the framing as they lead into, the first little bit of those first rooms and that do have a first, second floor, sometimes those tall walls just kind of, work their way into those a little bit. So we have some connectivity, but for the most part, not a whole lot of it. But one thing that we do have a lot of, though, is stairs.
Hmm.
Randy, when we look at that picture right there of those stairs, what are some of the issues we may run into if we don't have fire blocking or some kind of fire resistant material in those cavities?
Yeah, that's still a fire chase. It's a little bit like the balloon framing. If you get a fire going in there, it can run the stairs or, either the stair stringers, or if it can pop into the wall cavity, it's going to move. It's going to keep burning.
And what is a great way to help kind of tackle that area? Maybe a couple ways that you've seen or used yourself.
Well, the fire blocking light they're showing there is just the kind of the right at the stringer line. Just follow that down with some blocking to make sure that we can't jump from the stringer into the wall. That'll take care of a lot of it. And that can actually work as a nailer as well. If you got it in the right position, you can use that to fasten whatever the finish is on the inside of the drywall or inside
Right.
of the stairwell. Yeah.
Lewis, what's another product we could use in that area?
Safe and sound.
Whoa, what is safety
Give
sound?
the kids a way to sneak out of the house, without the parents knowing. I'm kidding. I got a 4-year-old and I got loud stairs in the house, and I'm not going to change a thing.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
No, we do. We see a lot of safe and sound packed into the framing around stairs, especially when there's a bedroom that's sharing a wall with a stairwell. This is pretty common in the way that houses are designed in the Northeast where I am. A lot of times you'll have like a first floor master, right? And somebody wants to be able to age in place and they're going to build that detail into their home, and you'll wind up with a stairwell nearby, or right next to it. And you just don't want to hear the sound. So people for us are using safe and sound in that area more so, I think, for the acoustic benefit more than even the fire benefit, right? But it's just, it helps. Everything helps. And I like what Randy had to say, about giving you a nailer, right? If you're going to bring sheetrock in on the other side and that's going to die up into the stair stringers, you're going to need a nailer there, right? So it's kind of multi-purpose, whether you go with the insulation or you go with the fire blocking, the blocks. Both will work, but I like ours because I do like to keep the stairwells quiet, you know.
So in my past, in that renovation world, one of the areas I always ran into that were just so tricky were these stepped roof lines where you have a 9 foot ceiling that has a 8 foot ceiling behind it, and that 1 foot part of the top never gets sheetrocked, right? They're just sheetrocking to the 9 foot, sheetrocking to the 8 foot, and now there's a void kind of in there from area to area. Or my personal favorite was the tub surrounds. I can't tell you how many houses I've been into where they have a drop soffit around that tub surround, and air and hot air is just ripping right up through there into that attic space. And they can't figure out, why is my ice dam so incredibly big in this one section? And we go up in there and it's the
Hmm.
tub almost every time, it seems like. So as you get these kind of weird transition areas, it's also important that we just kind of, as kind of a pro tip, do a walkthrough. Just walk around with you and somebody else and just say, where are some of the problematic areas that we should think about before we start getting insulation in there, before we start getting sheetrock in there, that we need to address, or at least make sure our subs know to address it, right, in the future. And so that way we can kind of check that off. Will, have you ever run into spots like that?
Yeah, and I think something that, I mentioned to you earlier, we do a lot of, encapsulated attic systems. And I think what you have to consider too is, when you're doing that, your air control layer's not at your sheetrock, typically. Um, and so any pipes, like ventilation pipes, bathroom fans, plumbing pipes, vents, whatever it might be, you got to make real sure that, or you need to make real sure that any of those voids or chases that exist that take, a path for fire to get into your attic, you can eliminate those as much as possible. And that could be like the fire block, even just can foam stuff. Anything to slow that down, that air is not going to be going in and trying to keep the flame from getting into that attic. Um, I think there's a big conversation though, like that to have about interiors. I don't know where you're going next with this topic, but I think that the big thing that I always tell people, it's like, we're not fighting the same fire today that we were like in the 1950s, Um, I mentioned this earlier, but what people fail to realize is like all these furnishings that we're putting in our houses. I mean, I hate to say they're bombs, but they're not far from it. I mean, it is unbelievable the foams that we're just pouring into our house and synthetics, hydrocarbons that are in everything from our flooring to our finishes and our cabinetry, couch cushions. I mean, we're in a different mode now than we were back in the say 1950s. There's a really good video that I've mentioned this before in some talks that's like the modern versus legacy furnishings. Do you have that in here by chance? Have you, yeah. So if you don't know what it is, it's basically the same given space burning in the 50s versus today with 50s furnishings versus modern furnishings. And what used to give you like 17 minutes to get out of a room before flashover is now three minutes.
Wow.
Oh,
So it's like, I hate to, it's like pick your poison again. Like if I'm not saying that blocking on your stairs isn't important, but I'm saying an awareness of what you're putting in your living room is probably more important because that's going to kill you fast. And then not only is it burning that fast, the smoke that's coming off of it is
Right.
incredibly toxic.
Yeah.
If an old couch cushion out of cotton was burning, a natural fiber, that smoke is not going to overcome you so fast. But you light foam on fire from a couch cushion, you can't breathe that. You're going to go down immediately. So there's a lot to be said about furnishings and then how fast and how hot fires are today. And then what we're doing to try to contain that. Because really, my mind is always how can we contain it as much as possible for as long as possible to let the people get out of the house. Like that's the thing. It's life safety. It's we can rebuild the house, but the life protection is critical here. So
You
all
know,
these things play into it, but I'm like, when you can wrap your kids' bedrooms in safe and sound or a non-combustible type material like that, and help protect them for long enough for them to get out of a window, or maybe you're trying to contain the fire into your garage or your kitchen, which is our laundry room for a dryer fire. Um, Shut the doors. There's all kinds of things we could talk about, but that's we talk about interiors, man. That's the conversation in my book.
Well, I think Nick is going to talk about interiors here soon, and some of it isn't just about, the ability for the occupants to get themselves out, but the safety, right? In
Hmm.
allowing the firefighters more time to get in and help get the occupants out,
It's good. Hmm.
absolutely.
right? So,
You led us right into this one. A lot of what we're seeing, which was conventional, two by framing, a lot of it's switching over to I-joists.
Hmm.
This is certainly something in New England. We see a ton of in New
a
England
ton.
and in other parts of the country. But there's kind of a downside to that, isn't there, Will?
Yeah.
That's not the same shape as a two by frame material.
Mhm.
That shape's a little bit different, which could potentially affect firefighters like you in a negative way.
Yeah.
So we need
Yeah.
to be able to protect that. Will, you wanna kind of talk it out
Yeah.
a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of got two things working here. You've got this floor assembly, this I-joist versus, your traditional lumber and even lumber today versus lumber, 70 years ago. We're not even having the same conversation. It's going to burn much, much faster now. It's just it's not near as dense, right? And so now we're going to take it and make it out of plywood chips and glue or OSB chips and glue, and now we have an I-joist. It's cheaper, it's lighter, it's faster. Um, but now we have faster failure of floor systems from fire impinging on it or pending on it. Combine that with now we have a couch that's like a bomb in our living room, burning it.
Couch bomb.
So now, that's the whole deal. Like, you've got so much little less time to get out, and then firemen have less time to get in, right? I mean, it's becoming more and more dangerous because of how we're building and what we're putting in them. And this plays into it. A lot of people get into truss roof conversations too about how fast trusses fail. I'm more concerned about this floor system failing on us than I am the roof. I mean, um, typically when we get fire venting out of a roof and it's burning, I mean, I hate to say it's too late, but it's a bad situation at that point. But you got a fire between floors and occupants, and you've got the risk of floor systems falling. That's a really dangerous situation. So I like your
And,
picture here, and we start talking about, most codes are going to, or municipalities or local jurisdictions are going to require you to have your 5/8 sheetrock on it. In this case, you've got your rock wool in there as well, which is certainly going to help because it's that middle piece that's so dangerous on an I-joist.
and why is that middle piece, Randy, so dangerous on that I-joist? It seems it's wood, right? And we had wood before.
Yeah, it's thin and it's full of glue. It burns pretty quick. OSB, yeah, OSB will burn up pretty quick.
So, Lewis, as we look at this here, this is for those who maybe can't see it as well. This is one of our assemblies that we use. Lewis, do you want to walk us through what this is, where it's installed, and why it's installed that way?
Yeah, so this is typical. This detail is typical in an I-joist assembly for an unfinished basement, right? So we'll see this in like the basement of the first floor. Here, the 3-inch thick mineral wool, that's our rock wool safe and sound. That's a replacement for sheetrock. So why sheetrock? Why mud and tape a basement if you're not going to make that living space and you don't have to here? So in our area where I serve the Northeast, we have a lot of full basements. We're going to put the mechanicals in those basements. They're noisy. And it's a great opportunity. You're getting your sound control and you're getting the fire rating you need, right? So the safe and sound in this assembly alone without sheetrock is going to give you the acoustical benefit, right? That we expect out of safe and sound, but it's also going to meet the requirements that are approved for I-joist fire protection. So it's kind of a one and done, super fast install, and it just gives you what exactly you're looking for there.
Well, then if you have a water leak, you can repair your pipes and not have to replace sheetrock.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yep.
You know, that's
Yeah, that
there's a lot,
battle
there's
come
other
right out.
benefits to that, you know.
So when it comes to, protecting those eye joists, it's really that web. So whether it's sheetrock, whether it's something like safe and sound, protecting the fire from getting to that flames, that's ultimately going to go a long way in helping protect these men and women down on the left-hand side who are help fighting that fire, protecting them. And we certainly have great documentation around all this as well. We're getting close to the end of our time here, but I do want to touch on multifamily. We start to get all these families together. We get these different units together. Randy, why would we want to have good fire protection on those adjoining walls and floor to floor? Why can't we just have it all be wood and be all right?
It's getting people out of there if it's on fire. We want to slow that fire down as much as possible. Give the people, the occupants, the opportunity to get out safely. That's huge. Yeah.
I mean, you can really see in this picture how it is just stick after stick after stick. My last job, we used to love seeing these buildings. We used to love selling wood on these buildings. But now on this job, looking at the fire safety aspect of it, boy, you can see how it is critical. And Will, you said earlier that wood is just not the same. It's not
No,
what it used to be.
no.
So you really got to make sure that those units are protected. And floor to floor too, right, guys?
Hmm. Yeah, I
Um,
think code's probably done a pretty good job of keeping up with like multifamily stuff. You know,
Hmm.
it's such a high risk area. Whether they're sprinkled now, you've got fire alarm systems installed professionally in every unit. There's that goes on and on, but yeah, I mean, it's like it's almost scary when you see these all being built out of sticks, and you're like, oh my gosh.
s-
uh,
you know,
it's like
s-
the ones that burn before they're finished is like some of the craziest videos you can see.
it's scary but exciting all in the same breath to know that hey, we can take these buildings and we can make them safe. We
Hmm.
have systems, we have the information, we have amazing people like Randy and Will who have the experience, who can come in and figure out where do we put these different materials, different systems to help protect the people, to help protect these builds year after year. And it's certainly something that's extremely important, as we start to look at the equation of walls and roofs and just making sure that we have an answer, right, Will?
Hmm.
Whether it's a sprinkler, like you suggested, Randy, some of these other insulation, the way they kind of interact with fire blocking, and other things like that. We need to have some kind of way, and it may change from building to building, but we want to have some kind of way to help protect against fire. And it could be, right, Lewis, it could be a WUI area from the outside, or maybe it's just from the inside. Again, that equation will change, but the goal of having a non-combustible solution or a way to protect these people is always one of our answers. It's always something we strive for. If you're interested more in looking at different WUI style options, we have another webinar coming up on October 28th at 11 a.m. Sorry, 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Pacific time. If you want to dive into a little bit more of the commercial side of the WUI aspect, some great people, are going to be talking about this. Highly recommend it. Next webinar, our class webinar, we're going to be talking about moisture, resilient builds, lessons from wall assemblies and failures. We kind of are running a little bit thin today, so we didn't get to all your questions, and I apologize to everyone. We will come back to those and answer what we can. But we are out of time, so as always, stay R classy, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nick.
Yep.
Will, I'm going to email you about a contemporary concrete couch. I've got this great idea. So,
oh man, yeah, I know. It's go find one that's not full of foam, and you'll really be doing something. I just put more smoke detectors in your house is all I can tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but
All
good
righty.
deal,
Well,
man.
thanks
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya.